I'm going to share with you how I made this boat cake. I start with making a sheet cake, and this one was a chocolate cake. I should have actually cut out a template of the boat size, but I just went for it and I carved out the shape of the boat that I wanted, and then I started to cut it out of the cake. Don't throw away the rest of the cake that you're cutting because we will use it to create the top part of the boat. I'm going to fill and stack my cake as I usually do. I work with frozen cake layers, and that helps me a lot to really fill the cakes and keep them sturdy, and so they won't crumble and fall apart while carving the shape. Now I'm going to use all those parts that I cut off from the cake. I cut them out into this long rectangle shapes to put them around the border of the boat. Now that I'm happy with this shape, I will start on the crumb coat. Cakes usually take 2 layers of frosting. The first frosting is a crumb coat to hold all the crumbs together, and it should be a very thin layer where you can actually see the cake behind it, so it's a very thin layer. And then you chill the cake and bring it back out and do a second and final coat. After applying a thin layer of buttercream, I use this cake scraper to smooth it all around the cake. I have a small section of the cake, like a cube, that I'm gonna also build and fill it together. And I'm gonna use this as the room in the boat. It's okay if the parts are not like one full block, but you could just glue them together. After all, these are pieces from our cake trimmings. And just fill it with a layer of frosting because it's all gonna be edible, and also coat it. I chilled that small cube of cake, and after it's completely cold, I'm gonna put it on top of the boat, and it will serve as the room of the boat. Now I'm gonna apply the second layer of frosting, which is the final layer. This one should be a little bit thicker than the first thin crumb coat. I'm gonna apply it all over the cake and even the top and on the inside of the boat. I make sure that the frosting is all covering the cake properly, no air bubbles. And after I spread it out with the spatula like this, I then smooth it out with this cake scraper. It's time to cover the cake with fondant. So the first thing I do is measure the cake and see how much fondant I'm gonna use. I'm gonna put the cake back in the fridge while I make that fondant soft and malleable to work with. And then I'm gonna roll it out in the shape of the boat all around, like a long rectangle piece that I measured out. And I'm gonna cut it to the size of the boat as well. To put the fondant onto the boat cake, I'm going to use the paneling method where you roll the fondant onto the rolling pin and then you unfold it onto the boat. This way it's done around a cake. Normally, I don't usually like to do this method, But here it works perfectly because, as you could see, there's like, we need a long vertical section of fondant, and you could just easily unfold it around the boat. I'll use the fondant smoother to really press and smooth the fondant all over the cake. I then trim off any excess that are sticking up from the cake. And repeat the same process on the other side. Unfold the fondant around the cake, make sure it reaches all the way to the top, and then trim off any excess fondant sticking up. So for the top part of the cake, I'm going to get a large piece of fondant and just cover it over the top. I'll make sure it's bigger than the boat because I need it to fit inside the grooves as well. You can use your hands or any fondant modeling tools to get the fondant really inside the grooves or the corners of the boat. After cutting off all the excess and smoothing the boat all around, I'm going to start adding some decoration and accessories around the boat to really show the design. For the rail, I took a flower wire and covered it with fondant, then painted it with edible silver color and left it to dry completely before I applied it onto the boat. And if it hasn't dried or I see any fingerprints left on it, I'll just give it another coat of paint. I'm adding blue buttercream to the board to mimic the sea. I'm gonna add 2 shades of blue, and then I'm gonna give it a lot of texture to kind of mimic the waves in the sea. I also created some shark fins and left them out to dry so they can stand straight, and you could just stick them into the buttercream. And that is the final cake. I hope you love it.